Hi everyone, my name is Sine and I am Tales of Fantasia, and I'm so excited today to be filming my first long form video content for my YouTube channel. And today I will be sharing with you my in-depth review of Yesteryear by Caro Claire Burke. Now, Caro Claire Burke has written this as her debut novel. If you're not familiar with her, she actually is a podcaster and shares writing on Substack as well, and she has kind of cultivated a bit of a reputation for critiquing the tradwife influencer space over the last few years. And that is exactly what this book seeks to do. It is a critique, a fictional critique of the tradwife influencer space that follows Natalie Helen Mills, who is a tradwife influencer with the picture perfect life on Instagram, who is thrown back in time to 1855, where she actually has to homestead the way that she has been portraying that she does, smoke and mirrors though in reality, on social media, without all of the modern conveniences like nannies and dishwashers that she is actually used to. Her husband is a bit of a bumbling idiot in this book, but we must be reminded that Natalie is an unreliable narrator as well. And I, like so many people on the internet, have been morbidly fascinated by the tradwife influencer space, and especially by accounts like Ballerina Farm, which this is very clearly not so loosely based on. I would say that there is quite a overt influence there, that Ballerina Farm has inspired this novel. As someone who is one of the angry women, as they are described in this book, who hate follows that social media account, as soon as I saw it advertised that this book was being released, I knew that I had to read it, because I knew that I was exactly the target audience for this novel. And so I dove in without much real understanding of how she was doing the novel. I knew that there was a time travel element, and I knew that it was based on Ballerina Farm, and that's about as much as I knew. And I was very pleasantly surprised by the quality of the writing from Caro Claire Burke to start with, and also by her ability to create a suspenseful thriller out of something that is frankly not that thrilling a story in real life, you know. So I did really enjoy this book, and I did rate it 5 stars. But now to get into the meat of why I rated it 5 stars and what my thoughts are around the story and how Caro Claire Burke has portrayed the tradwife influencer movement, I'm just going to jump right in. So up until about the 60% of the way mark in this book, I didn't love the way that the time travel element was done as I was first reading the novel. I found it really jarring that Natalie is thrown back in time and the pregnancy that she had disappeared, and I felt that as someone who reads a lot of historical fiction, especially stuff with time travel in it, you can probably see behind me the Outlander series and A Discovery of Witches, which are 2 of my favorite series of all time. I had some critique around how the time travel element of this story was portrayed, and I was actually texting my friend who I kind of buddy read this book with as I was reading it, and saying to her like that it was basically a shame that it was done so badly in this book, because the virality of the book meant that no one else was going to be able to touch this sort of theme for another 10 to 15 years, at which point it may not any longer be culturally relevant. Well, I ate my words once I got to the end of the book, the big reveal, and the way that those 2 timelines of past and present converge, because oh my gosh, I thought it was so masterfully done. I am a little ashamed to say that I didn't really see it coming. I was very, very confused by a few things which were sort of Easter eggs as to how the story unfolds throughout the book. And it wasn't until the cabin and the manosphere in the woods that I really understood how this was coming together. I really enjoyed that big reveal and thought that that was really well done all in all. And by the time I finished the book, at the halfway point, I was thinking I was going to give this probably 3 out of 5. And by the end, I realized that it was a 5 out of 5 book for me. That's not to say that it is without criticism. I do have some criticisms of the story, and those are just my personal opinions, which I'm going to share for you now. One thing about this book is it does not reference any religious group overtly. And I think that was a really purposeful choice by Caro Claire Burke, because the tradwife movement, while this is very clearly based on Ballerina Farm or heavily influenced by Ballerina Farm, who are Mormon, the tradwife movement is a lot broader than that and kind of crosses into different denominations of faith. It is largely white, wealthy Christian women who are in this movement, but it's not just Mormon women. And I think that that was a deliberate choice by Caro Claire Burke to not overtly reference the religion, but I do think that it detracted from the story in some ways, because one thing that is really hard to ignore in the tradwife movement is that for these women, faith is the center of all of their choices in life. Faith it guides their choices in marriage, it guides their choices to have a lot of children, it guides their choices to not work outside of the home, and they are so very entrenched in this patriarchal faith that it cannot really be separated from the tradwife movement in the way that it has been in this story. Now, I'm not saying that Caro had to necessarily identify a faith, but most women who are in this tradwife movement, they have an external community of faith that is very, very influential to them and that keeps them on the straight and narrow, so to say, or keeps them adherent to the tenets of their faith. And I think in a lot of ways that circle of influence can be quite damning of these women, because let's face it, being a tradwife influencer is a little bit of an oxymoron, because being an influencer is a job. It's paid, it's work, and there are brand deals to negotiate, payments to collect, a business to run, content to create, edit, employees. Natalie in this book has multiple employees, and so let's face it, that is quite a traditional business model, and it doesn't really align with the tradwife ideals of being totally subservient to your husband and not having a career, not working. And I think that while Natalie did have some struggle with this internally, there wasn't that external portrayal of struggle, which I think really would have added gravitas to the story and legitimized the story a little bit more, because most women of faith are kind of going to church. They never go to church in this book, which really threw me. It mentions her mum and her sister going to church and interacting with a pastor, but there's no external faith influence really on Natalie outside of the Bible group that she goes to in college. And I think that that is unrealistic and detracts from the gravitas of the story, because I think if there was that critique of Natalie's business by the church, or that forceful push by the church to keep portraying her, or to portray her faith in her content, or portray her way of living in the content to kind of be a bit of an ambassador for the faith, which I think happens in some tradwife influencers kind of circles, it would have really added to the story and been a little bit more of a realistic portrayal of the story, in my opinion. I also wasn't a big fan of the, spoiler alert, the affair subplot that happens in the story. I just felt that it was unrealistic that Shannon would really have the affair. I can see it happening for material gains or to get the insider knowledge that she wanted to create an expose on Natalie. However, I just felt that the way that it panned out in the book, it didn't really add anything for me to the story. I didn't really like the way that it was done, and I felt that Shannon's character wasn't really fully fleshed out enough, which may again have been a deliberate choice by Caro Claire Burke to convey the unreliability of Natalie as the narrator, that she sees Shannon as so insignificant that she's not worthy of fully fleshing out as a character. But I feel that it was potentially not a conscious choice that happened that way. I liked the sort of insinuation that maybe she's a bit of a lesbian. I thought that that was really clever, also really interesting, but I think that that probably could have been, again, fleshed out a little bit more in the story, and it would have added a little bit more to the story if that was delved into in a little bit more detail. Not necessarily a lot more detail, but a little bit more detail would have really added to the story, in my opinion. So yeah, those are my critiques of the book, but overall I do think that this is still a really important piece of social commentary that is relevant to our times. I did give it 5 stars. I thought it was an excellent debut, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what Caro Claire Burke does next in the literary space. Have you read Yesteryear? And if so, please tell me your thoughts down below. I would love to hear from you, and I would also love to hear from you over whether you are as morbidly fascinated by the tradwife influencer movement as I am. Thank you so much for tuning in. I will see you next time.